Hi everyone, this is a Math 082 video that is going to work with slope. In a previous video, I already defined the slope and taught how to identify the slope of the line given the graph, and I also created a video that just covered vertical and horizontal lines. So this video is only going to talk about how to identify the slope of a line between two ordered pairs. So if you recall in the previous video, we defined slope in the following ways. We said that it's rise over run, the change in y over the change in x, and I also mentioned this equation right here. And that's the equation, which if you're taking the exam, you're going to have to memorize, that is going to help us to find the slope. So let's get started. So we have m, or our slope, is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So the first thing to realize here is that this division symbol is grouping these values together. So we have to subtract before we divide. Another thing to realize is that there are a lot of different possibilities when we evaluate our slope. We could get a positive number, we could get a negative number, we could find out that our slope is 0, or if it's some sort of number divided by 0, if we have 0 on the bottom, then we could find out that our slope is undefined. So I'm going to do one of each example in random order, just so that as we go through, you can practice identifying which of these four outcomes we have. So let's get started. So what I do when I solve these problems is I always just copy this equation onto my piece of paper that I'm working on. And even if you're working online, it's really a great idea to keep a notebook and kind of just keep track of all of your work, because if you go back into Mom, it's going to give you a slightly different problem. It has what's called a random seed, and so the numbers change from problem to problem. And so if you have a nice notebook where you're keeping track of all of your work, then you have problems that you can go back and review and study from. So we have two ordered pairs that are being given to us, and we need to figure out which one is 1 and which one is 2. Really doesn't matter. Usually I just take the first one and I call that ordered pair number 1. And I take the second one and I call that ordered pair number 2. So now that I've identified or defined my variables, it's literally just a matter of plugging things in. So I have 2 minus 7 divided by 3 minus 5. Now remember, this division symbol is grouping things for us, so we have to subtract before we divide. So we got negative 5 over negative 2. The negatives cancel out, and we end up with positive 5 over 2. Okay? So generally speaking, we tend to leave these as an improper fraction. So you do not want to write it as a mixed number. And you also don't want to write it as a decimal. Okay, so it's true that 5 halves is equal to 2 1/2. Or, as a decimal, it's 2.5. That's true, but that's not how we generally express slope. So we were just going to leave it like that. So I want you to think about, as you're doing these problems, what's the easiest mistake to make? I always ask my students that so that they can avoid making such a mistake. So let's think about that question as we do this next problem. So again, first of all, we're going to label our ordered pairs. Doesn't matter which one's 1 and which one's 2, as long as you're consistent as you work through your problem. Okay. So we're going to have negative 3 minus negative 3. Then we're going to have negative 2 minus negative 6. Did you figure out what the easiest mistake to make is? Well, in my opinion, having graded a lot of things in my past, is that you have to watch your signs, S-I-G-N-S signs. Okay? It's so easy to make sign errors, and that's what I find students most often. If they miss these problems, it's not because they don't know the equation, it's not because they mislabeled their ordered pairs, it's because they did the math quickly in their head and they made a sign error. So remember, if I have minus a negative, that becomes plus a positive. So negative 3 plus 3 is 0. Negative 2 plus 6 is positive 4. So 0 over 4 is 0, so we have a slope of 0. And that's our answer, and we're done. Let's do 2 more problems. How about this problem right here? So again, we need to go through and label. And again, it doesn't matter which one you want to call 1 and which one you want to call 2. Okay, and as a matter of practice, I always write down my equation, plus that's the easiest way for me to memorize things. If I have to memorize something, I just write it down a bunch of times. Fortunately, once you get out of school, memorization isn't as highly in demand as it is in school. All right, so we have negative 7 minus 2. If sign numbers confuse you, remember you can always make this plus a negative. Okay, so that's going to give us a negative 9 on the top. And then 5 minus 5 is 0. Uh-oh, we are trying to divide by 0. And if you recall, we can't divide by 0. Okay, you can even type that into your calculator, right? If you forget on a test, try dividing negative 9 by 0. You'll find out that your calculator says error. That's what most software or computers or calculators are going to give you, something along those lines. And so when you get that, then you need to translate that as being undefined. All right, let's go to our 4th example. I'm going to change one thing over here so that I can give you what I promised, which is a positive slope. Or sorry, a negative slope, because we've already had one that was 0, one that was undefined. Now we need to have one that is positive. Or sorry, one that is negative. Okay, so again, we are labeling our ordered pairs. Oops, how did that happen? Okay, then we are writing our equation. And then we are filling things in. Minus negative 3. Okay, negative 7. Okay, I'm going to have to change this problem a little bit so that I can give you... Is that going to work? Negative 7 minus 6. No, this is going to give us a positive number. So let's change this really quick. Let's change it back to a negative 6. Let's see if that works. No, I'm going to make it a negative 8. Haha. All right, so, well, sorry about that, guys. Let's see if this can give us a negative number, as I promised. All right, so we have negative 4 minus negative 3. If I add these together, that gives me a negative 1. And then I add these together, that gives us a positive 1. So overall, our slope is negative 1 over 1, or negative 1. Okay, so let's review. We have one slope. Our first slope was a positive number. Okay, then we had a slope of 0. Then we had a slope that was undefined here. And then we have a negative slope. So remember, all 4 of those are possible when you're finding the slope between 2 points.